Somewhere right now, there's a show you've never heard of, sitting on a streaming platform with a cliffhanger ending that will never be resolved, killed off not because audiences didn't love it, but because of a spreadsheet nobody outside the company ever saw. That's not a rare event anymore. In 2026 alone, one streaming platform has already canceled 11 different shows, some after reviews that would have kept a broadcast series alive for years. But here's the part that should genuinely surprise you. The reasons shows get canceled too soon have almost nothing to do with each other across different eras of television. A show killed in 2002 was murdered by something completely different than a show killed in 2026, and understanding exactly what changed between those two cancellations tells you almost everything about how the entire TV industry actually works behind the scenes. Let's start with the cancellation most people already know, because it's the one that basically invented the entire genre of TV grief, the one everyone already knows, and why it's the perfect case study. In 2002, Fox aired the first episode of Firefly, Joss Whedon's space western about a crew of smugglers drifting through a lawless solar system. 14 episodes were produced. Only 11 made it to air before the show was canceled, and here's the detail that turns this from a simple bad luck story into something close to industry malpractice. Fox didn't just cancel the show quickly. It aired the surviving episodes out of order, scrambling the storyline so badly that even viewers who wanted to follow along couldn't. The pilot episode, the one specifically written to introduce every character and explain the world, wasn't even the first one broadcast. Think about what that actually means. A show wasn't just given a short runway. It was handed a runway pointed in the wrong direction, then blamed for not taking off. The 3 unaired episodes eventually leaked out on DVD, which, strangely, is part of what kept the fandom alive long enough to pressure Universal into greenlighting a follow-up film, Serenity, in 2005, a rare case where a canceled show got something close to a proper ending anyway. But here's the question worth sitting with, because it's about to come up again and again throughout this video in different disguises. If Firefly had simply aired in the order it was filmed, on a normal schedule, would it have survived? Nobody can know for certain. What we do know is that its cancellation had almost nothing to do with the writing, the cast, or the concept, and everything to do with a scheduling decision made by people who apparently hadn't watched the show they were airing. That patterned brilliant show, buried by its own network, turns out to be less of an exception and more of an entire category. The show so good, the network still doesn't get credit for it. A year before Firefly ever aired, NBC had already run this exact experiment with an entirely different genre and an almost identical outcome. Freaks and Geeks premiered in 1999, created by Paul Feig and executive produced by Judd Apatow, following 2 groups of Michigan high schoolers navigating the specific, unglamorous misery of adolescence in 1980. Its ensemble cast reads today like a lineup nobody could have predicted. James Franco, Seth Rogen, Jason Segel, Linda Cardellini, Busy Phillips. 18 episodes were produced. Only 12 ever aired. And the reason has almost nothing to do with quality. Critics loved it enough to hand it an Emmy for casting. And it remains one of the most quietly influential shows in television history, spawning almost an entire generation of comedy talent. So why did it die after 1 season? NBC gave it an erratic, constantly shifting time slot, refused to invest in any online tie-in promotion at a moment when that kind of grassroots marketing was becoming genuinely valuable, and in what might be the single most baffling programming decision on this entire list, scheduled it directly against Who Wants to Be a Millionaire at the peak of that show's cultural dominance. Then, having sabotaged its own time slot, NBC measured Freaks and Geeks against the ratings of Frasier and Friends, 2 of the biggest hits in the network's history, and concluded the smaller show wasn't performing. Here's the uncomfortable pattern starting to emerge. In the network television era, a show's cancellation often had almost nothing to do with whether people who watched it loved it. It had to do with whether the network gave it a fair chance to be found in the first place. And if that's true for 2 of the most beloved cult shows in television history, it raises an obvious question. How many other shows were killed the exact same way, with nobody ever noticing because they didn't have a Joss Whedon or a Judd Apatow attached to make people care? That question gets even more interesting once you look at what happened when the network stopped being the primary source of prestige television entirely, and a premium cable channel decided the rules could be different. Except, as it turns out, they weren't quite different enough, when even HBO isn't immune. By the mid-2000s, HBO had built a reputation as the one place where a genuinely ambitious, difficult, uncommercial show could survive purely on critical acclaim and cultural cachet. Then, in 2006, it canceled Deadwood. After 3 seasons, a show now widely regarded as one of the best-written series in television history, with 8 Emmy wins across 28 nominations, and a reputation for dialogue almost nobody else on television was even attempting. Here's the detail that makes this cancellation different from the others, though, and worth paying close attention to because it's the first real hint of a pattern that would come to define the entire streaming era decades later. HBO didn't frame it as a cancellation at all. The network simply declined to renew the expiring contract options of the show's cast, while insisting, technically, that Deadwood hadn't actually been canceled. It's a distinction that meant nothing to fans, who were left with an unresolved, genuinely unfinished story for 13 years until creator David Milch finally reunited most of the original cast for a standalone television movie in 2019 that tied up the dangling plot lines everyone had assumed would never be addressed. Notice what's different here compared to Firefly and Freaks and Geeks. Nobody blamed bad scheduling. Nobody blamed a hostile time slot. The reported reasoning was financial. The accumulated cost of a long-running, elaborately produced show simply stopped making sense on HBO's books, regardless of how many awards it kept winning. That's a much colder, much more familiar-sounding reason. And it's about to become the single dominant explanation for almost every cancellation that follows for the next 20 years. Which brings us to the moment everything about cancellations changed completely. Not because networks got crueler, but because an entirely new kind of company entered the picture with an entirely different way of deciding what counts as success. But before we get to today's algorithm-driven cancellations, there's a transitional era worth understanding first, because Netflix didn't invent this ruthlessness overnight. It built the pattern slowly, on a specific genre, years before anyone noticed a pattern at all. The 2-season curse. If you were a science fiction fan on Netflix in the mid to late 2010s, you probably noticed something without being able to name it. Ambitious, expensive sci-fi shows kept getting exactly 2 seasons, then vanishing. The OA, a genuinely strange and beloved supernatural mystery, ended on a cliffhanger after 2 seasons that its creators had clearly intended to resolve across a longer arc. Sense8, The Wachowskis' Globe, spanning drama about 8 strangers psychically linked across continents, met the same fate, rescued only by a single wrap-up special after enough fan outcry. Altered Carbon, The Order, Another Life, all canceled at the exact same 2-season mark, almost like clockwork. Here's the detail that turns this from a coincidence into a genuine pattern, and it comes from industry analysts who started digging into Netflix's contract structures around this time. Renewing a show for a 3rd season, they found, tends to be significantly more expensive than renewing it for a 2nd, because Netflix's standard deals typically include built-in pay increases for cast and crew with every additional season. That means the exact moment a show has proven itself popular enough to deserve a bigger, more ambitious 3rd season is precisely the moment it becomes least cost-effective to actually make. 2 seasons, under this logic, isn't a storytelling decision at all. It's the mathematical sweet spot where a show has generated enough subscriber goodwill to justify its initial cost, right before the price of continuing it jumps high enough to threaten the platform's margins. That's a genuinely strange incentive structure once you sit with it. It means some of the most ambitious, world-building science fiction ever produced for the platform was never actually designed to have a beginning, middle, and end. It was designed to run exactly as long as it stayed cheap, and not 1 season longer. Which raises an uncomfortable question worth carrying into the algorithm era we're about to cover. How many shows have creators quietly stopped writing 3-season arcs for at all, simply because they've learned, the hard way, that the 3rd season is the one that never actually gets made? The algorithm doesn't care how much you loved it. Here's a thought experiment. Imagine a show costs $150 million to produce, spends 2 full weeks sitting in the platform's own official top 10 rankings, and still gets canceled after a single season. That's not a hypothetical, it's reportedly exactly what happened to The Abandons, a big-budget Western from Sons of Anarchy creator Kurt Sutter, canceled by Netflix in 2026. Sutter didn't take the decision quietly. publicly accusing the platform of choosing what he called the algorithm over a creator's vision, and pointedly noting just how much money had reportedly been spent on a show Netflix wasn't willing to fund for a second round. That single sentence, the algorithm over a creator's vision, is worth unpacking because it's become the defining complaint of an entire era of television, and it points to something genuinely different from every cancellation we've covered so far. Streaming platforms generally don't release their actual viewership numbers publicly, which means nobody outside the company, including the people who made the show, really knows what standard it's being measured against. What analysts have pieced together instead is a set of internal metrics platforms are believed to prioritize. How many subscribers finish an entire season within the first week after release? How many finish it within the first month? And critically, how a show's cost compares against those completion numbers relative to everything else already sitting on the platform. Here's why that's such a fundamentally different threat to a show's survival than anything Firefly or Freaks and Geeks ever faced. A network show competes against whatever else airs in the same time slot on the same night. A streaming show effectively competes against every single other title on the entire platform, simultaneously forever, filtered through a recommendation system that decides who even gets shown a thumbnail for it in the first place. One industry analyst described a case where an animated series was quietly killed after a single season, despite what its own creator called a genuinely tremendous critical and audience response. The show simply never got pushed hard enough by the platform's own algorithm for enough people to discover it existed. If a recommendation engine doesn't prioritize your show, in other words, it doesn't matter how good it is, nobody may ever even see the thumbnail. And there's a second financial trap layered underneath all of that, one unique specifically to the streaming model, and it might be the most quietly brutal reason of all. Multiple industry analysts have pointed out that streaming platforms typically increase a show's budget with every renewal, bigger cast bonuses, higher production costs, larger effects budgets as a series proves itself. That means the exact same show gets more expensive to keep alive the longer it survives, at precisely the moment it's finally building the loyal audience that used to be a show's best argument for staying on air. A slow-building word of mouth hit the kind of show that historically needed 2 or 3 seasons to find its audience, the way The Office or Parks and Recreation once did on broadcast television, simply doesn't get that runway anymore. The economics of streaming are quietly built to punish exactly the kind of show that used to reward patience. So here's the question worth asking, and it's the same question we asked about Firefly all the way back at the start of this video, just wearing a different disguise. If the shows getting canceled today aren't failing because audiences dislike them, and they're not failing because of a hostile time slot either, are they actually failing at all? Or is failure, in the streaming era, simply a number on an internal spreadsheet that has almost nothing to do with whether real people watching in real living rooms genuinely loved what they were watching, what actually changed, and what never did? Look back across every story in this video, and a strange through line emerges. Firefly and Freaks and Geeks were killed by networks that didn't know how to find or nurture the audiences they already had. Deadwood was killed by a budget decision dressed up in careful corporate language. And the shows being canceled today are being killed by algorithms measuring completion rates and cost curves that no viewer will ever see, on a platform with no obligation to explain its reasoning to anyone. What hasn't changed across every single decade of this story is the fan on the other end of the cancellation, the person who found something they genuinely loved, only to have it end without warning, without resolution, and usually without so much as an explanation from the people who made the decision. That's the one constant running underneath 60 years of network scheduling chaos, premium cable budget cuts, and streaming platform data models. The audience is always the last to know, and almost never the reason. Which leaves one genuinely open question worth sitting with as you finish this video. Streaming platforms could, in theory, release real viewership numbers, give slow-building shows more patience, and treat completion data as one signal among several rather than the entire verdict. Nothing is stopping that from happening, except the fact that it would almost certainly cost more and take longer to find the next Breaking Bad that way. So the real question isn't really whether the next great show will get canceled too soon. Historically, given everything you just watched, it almost certainly will. The real question is whether anyone in the industry actually wants to fix that, or whether a fast, ruthless cancellation cycle has simply become too profitable to ever slow down.